Mädchen, und davon träumt bei jedem deutschen Mädchen, denn die schwarze SS und die braune
Get me Cardinal Volponi.
Councillor Vogel of the German Embassy, Your Eminence. I'm afraid His Eminence isn't available. Can I take a message?
He's not there.
How very convenient. A telegram. To Ambassador Weizsäcker. SS police detachment today attacked by partisans. No, take out partisans. SS police detachment today attacked by terrorists in the Via Rasella. Death roll 31. Several seriously injured. No arrests of those responsible. As reprisal against this outrage, Colonel Steiner of the Gestapo has been ordered to seize and execute 310 hostages. As the Führer's political diplomatic representative in Rome, I strongly advise against this until we have had an opportunity of assessing the Pope's attitude on this matter. Read that back to me.
To Ambassador Weizsäcker. SS police detachment today attacked by terrorists in the Via Rasella. Death roll 31, several seriously injured, no arrests of those responsible. As reprisal against this outrage, Colonel Steiner of the Gestapo.
Excuse me. Where can I find Cardinal Volponi?
Have you an appointment?
No.
A letter of introduction, perhaps, from your priest?
No.
Well, I'm afraid it's impossible. His Eminence is a very busy man. You tell me what it's about, and I can decide whether or not it comes within his jurisdiction.
It's a personal matter.
I'm sorry.
Just tell me where I can find him, please.
He's not here, and even if he was...
Are you his secretary?
Yes.
The Cardinal and I are old friends.
Well, if you care to leave your name, I'll tell him you called.
Cinelli. Maria Cinelli. Tell him it's to do with Paolo Borelli.
Father Borelli?
Yes.
His Eminence has gone to see the Abbot General, but he shouldn't be too long. If you'd care to wait.
No, I don't want to be out on the streets after curfew.
Well, have you an address where he can contact you?
I'll give you a telephone number. Don't ring me as soon as he gets back. It's important that I speak to him.
I understand.
Thank you.
Any mention?
Not a word.
All Rome is talking about it. The name of the Via Racella's on everyone's lips.
Have you read his statement?
We recall that on other occasions we have addressed ourselves to the grave times to which the country is passing. When did this come out?
2 hours ago. A late edition.
Our appeal is made directly to the conscience of the population, who have so admirably demonstrated their spirit of sacrifice and profound sense of dignity. Spirit of sacrifice. Do not, with violent urges, shatter this attitude, which is so worthy of the virtues of our people. Not one word about the hostages.
Why should there be? This is an appeal for restraint, written in anticipation of what might happen after the sentences have been carried out.
What do you mean, after? There'll be no executions.
I spent an hour with him this afternoon.
Did he say anything about Father Borelli?
No, his name was never mentioned. We discussed certain alternative proposals suggested to me by a member of the German embassy.
Vogel?
Yes.
Yes, he rang me earlier.
Did you speak to him?
No, I thought it best if I saw you first. What sort of proposals?
Collective punishment, in the form of a financial levy imposed upon the citizens of Rome, which would then be used to aid and support the families of the victims.
Well, that sounds reasonable enough.
Except that the military want their pound of flesh, and Vogel feels that without our support, his idea will be rejected.
And how did His Holiness react to that?
By dismissing it out of hand. He feels that any intervention on our part would cause the Germans to re-examine their attitude to us and threaten the territorial rights of the Vatican.
And what about the rights of the hostages? What about Father Borelli?
Our liaison with the underground has already appealed to the communists to advise those responsible for what happened in the Via Racella to give themselves up. But they refuse.
And did he tell them what would happen to the hostages if they don't?
No.
Well, then.
Would it have made any difference if he had?
Probably not. To them it was an act of war.
For which the innocent must now suffer.
Well, only if he refuses to intervene.
Cardinal Volponi, you know better than most that the relationship which exists between us and the German authorities is blessed by the virtue, or rather the necessity, of political expediency. We dare not allow anything to endanger that relationship.
With the Allied armies less than 30 miles away from Rome, I would have thought that the usefulness of that relationship was nearly exhausted.
The Holy Father doesn't think so. And neither do I.
Kesselring has enough problems trying to keep back the Allies at Anzio without taking action against the Vatican. The Germans have lost the war.
Well, it isn't them he's worried about.
Yes, I know.
Can you imagine what would happen if the Supreme Pontiff were to denounce the Germans?
Not publicly. A personal protest would be sufficient.
What would get out? The people would interpret it as a call to arms. There'd be fighting in the streets. And once the Germans had been expelled from the city, other heads would roll, and the communists take over.
The party in Italy is not that strong.
And nothing on the scale that Pius would have the Americans believe, I agree. But to assess the mood for social changes in a country, one doesn't have to go around counting the heads of party members. What Pius wants is an orderly transfer of power from the Germans to the Allies. What he does not want is a situation where irresponsible elements, instead of waiting for the arrival of the Allies, may attempt to seize power on their own initiative.
As the Pope's personal liaison between the Germans and the SS, is there nothing that you can do?
His Holiness has forbid me to go anywhere near the German offices until it's all over.
And when will that be?
God knows.
See, if only we could obtain a delay. Let the anger of the Germans exhaust itself, it would give Vogel and his ambassador time to prevent it.
It's a slight possibility.
And Father Borelli?
The man's a communist.
Isn't it possible to sympathize with the aspirations of the resistance without becoming a Marxist?
Oh, very well, then. He's charged with actively associating with known communists, which amounts to the same thing.
How do you know that?
Steiner told me.
Oh, I see. You've already discussed it with him.
Of course.
And therefore he is to be abandoned. If all else fails, if the Holy Father refuses to speak out, and I suppose they would listen to a cardinal.
You would go against the Pope?
No. Not against him, no, of course not. But if I were to take it upon myself, publicly, to condemn the taking of hostages...
I, for one, would oppose you.
Yes, I know.
His will is law.
But if he is wrong...
Then he will account to God for his actions.
And I? Whom do I account to?
Anything that serves in the fight against Bolshevism is welcome to the Curia. You are a prince of the Church, and I hope you will not shirk your responsibilities.
You talk like a Jesuit.
If I were, I'd be asking to what extent are your feelings influenced by the beliefs you once shared with Father Borelli?
Look, it is not just Father Borelli or even the hostages. Men die in war. But how will history judge the Church? Our failure to protect the Jews from extermination.
Many of them obtained refuge in our churches and monasteries.
Oh, yes, dependent upon the heroism of individuals. But the 8,000 living here in Rome, we allowed, without protest, to be deported for extermination in the German concentration camps. And now this.
Governments come and go, but the Holy Church continues and is stronger than ever, undeterred in its apostolic mission.
And since when has it been part of the Church's apostolic mission to collaborate with murderers and to remain silent in the face of crimes that are an outrage against both man and the divine law?
There is nothing his providence does not foresee or permit.
I'm sure Father Borelli and the hostages will find that a great comfort.
May I ask what you intend doing?
I don't know. I need to think about it.
I pray that you reach the right decision. The Church has need of men like you, Your Eminence. And though I realize how painful and distressing this must be to you, it would be a tragedy if you allowed it to destroy your career.
Get me the Italian police headquarters. I want to speak to Questore Pavolini. I'll hold. Steiner, I need another 20 names. I had, but 2 more soldiers have died, so the number has increased, a ratio of 10 to 1, remember? Then give me some Jews. The important thing is to complete the list. This thing has to be finished in 24 hours. Deliver the prisoners not later than lunchtime tomorrow.
Good morning.
Morning.
Been working all night?
Yes?
The conference is at 9.
I know.
Have you, got all you want?
More or less. I will have by lunchtime.
How do you go about selecting them?
I take whatever Jews, communists, or political suspects I can find, and then make do with whatever else is available. Even a priest.
Couldn't you delay it? Ambassador Weizsäcker...
Still think that the Pope will intervene?
Yes.
You haven't been doing your homework, Councillor. I can assure you the last thing Pius wants is to be reminded of what we're about.
But he must intervene.
The Pope's personal liaison visits me regularly. Whenever there's a problem affecting our relationship, he comes into this office, sits in that chair, drinks my wine. We're always able to reach a compromise or a solution to whatever complaint or request he may bring along with him. But yesterday he never came. No telephone call. No messages. Nothing. Now, why was that? They know what happened, and they know what we intend to do about it. Why then haven't I heard from them?
Well, there must be some explanation.
Oh, there is. Look, this war is nearly over.
Doesn't that frighten you?
Retribution?
Yes.
I regret nothing.
The Allies have issued warnings, threatening individuals who commit what they describe as crimes against humanity. I lack your strength. I couldn't do it.
Where was your conscience in 1940, Herr Vogel, when things were going well? Anyhow, I very much doubt if the Allies will bother to differentiate between the devil they know and the Judas they despise.
I'm not a diplomat! I'm not one of your politicians. I'm a soldier. Those boys were my comrade, and we spoke the same language. Suffered together, fought together.
They were not strictly soldiers, General. The Boatswain SS was formed a year ago in South Tyrol. They just arrived in Rome for police duties.
They wore the uniform of the German army.
But were used to arrest strikers, communists, and all who resent our presence in Rome.
Don't tell me that even the Gestapo are getting cold feet over this Silbersturmbannführer.
My orders are to execute 10 Italians for every dead German.
It's still not enough! We ought to teach the bastards a lesson like we did in France and Poland.
What would you suggest, General?
Wipe out whole districts like Trastevere, San Lorenzo, and Testaccio, where communism is rife. Shoot the hostages. Transport the rest to the north. A policy of firmness and determination, that's what this situation demands. We've been left to the military.
I agree, but to deport the male population on such a large scale would mean using 2 or perhaps 3 divisions. And with the Allies 30 miles away from Rome, I doubt if Field Marshal Kesselring would approve.
In France, we shot 100 hostages for every German.
This is Rome, General Heidelmann. We have to consider world opinion and the Pope's reaction.
His Holiness has already been informed, Councillor Vogel.
When?
Directly Kesselring confirmed the execution order, Reichsfuhrer Himmler agreed that the Vatican be made aware of our plans.
Why wasn't I told?
The issue is no longer in discussion, Councillor Vogel. The decision has been taken.
I fail to see how he can allow this to happen.
There are many things you fail to see, Councillor. Including the fact that when we deported the children of Israel last year and you warned us that the Pope would bring down the heavens upon our heads, nothing happened. Not a spark of criticism.
But those hostages are not Jews.
A few will be.
How many?
At the moment, 65.
Then the rest will be Italians, Romans.
But why not? They murdered 33 of my boys!
But those hostages had nothing to do with what happened in the Vera cellar. They are innocent.
Exactly! In a situation where the civilian population are ready and waiting to take up arms against us, nothing is more effective than shooting a few hostages. When the men who have nothing to do with politics suddenly find their lives endangered by the activities of others, then it creates fear, friction, and division within the community. This is what we want.
Yes, it could also work the other way. Set up a political reaction and unify them in hatred against us, which is what the resistance want. And I still cannot understand how the Pope can ignore this despite his attitude on the Jewish question. This is Rome, the holy city, his own diocese.
Fogel, you give me a pain in the ass. How far have you got with it?
And one of our big problems was in finding a site suitable for the execution, somewhere close at hand, yet isolated enough for us to be able to carry out the operation quickly and without interference.
And?
There's a system of tunnels hidden amongst the Christian catacombs on the Via Ardientina, 2 miles south of here. Now, my engineers confirm that it's technically possible to transform the caves into a burial chamber by dynamiting the entrances, which saves us having to bury the bodies, which in view of the time factor is impossible.
Any other problems?
No, I have already selected the men for the job.
You've included officers?
Of course.
Good. And the hostages, how many have you got?
Including the Jews, under 200.
Well, you better get a move on. I'm making you only got another 5 or 6 hours. If you need me, I'll be in the Corso d'Italia. Vogel.
The day the Pope created you a cardinal, Paolo and I drank a toast.
Now you're being ironic.
Not at all. Cardinals who are honest and don't accept bribes are in short supply.
I tried to follow your movements, but it was difficult. You seem to be all over the place.
We did see you once. In Milan 2 years ago.
Yet you never bothered to contact me.
It wasn't safe. There'd been a strike against the war at the Pirelli factory and 164 of our comrades were arrested. Besides, you might have found it embarrassing. At that time, the church was making loud noises about priests serving in the resistance.
And how long have you been in Rome?
We came the week after the Jews were deported.
October.
Yes.
Is this where you live?
No. It's a safe house that we use from time to time. Giovanni, you and I have been friends for many years.
I hope we still are.
Then what do you propose to do about Paolo?
Were you and he involved in what happened at the Via Rasella yesterday?
Why do you ask?
It was a stupid, provocative act.
Provocative? The Germans occupy our land. They starve our children, deport, torture, kill, massacre.
And now you provoke them into committing further atrocities.
As it happens, we were not involved.
But you approve?
Yes.
Regardless of the consequences?
You talk as if the resistance were the guilty ones.
They could have waited. Within a month, the Allies will have entered Rome and it will all be over.
We must help to liberate ourselves.
What difference would it have made? The people don't want an uprising, so why try to force it on them?
Then perhaps what we did in the Via Rasella will rouse them out of their lethargy.
It may also provoke reaction.
Against the hostages. Giovanni.
Well, there will be reprisals.
Deportation.
With the Nazis, anything is possible.
You haven't answered my question.
But Maria, who knows how it will all end?
But you fear the worst, is that it?
Yes. But we have friends at the embassy.
We?
Vogel. He's a moderate.
Such friends are more dangerous than enemies. But what about Father Borelli? I would have thought that to kill kill a priest would undermine the delicate understanding that exists between the Vatican and the Germans? Or are we back to the 1920s again, when His Holiness allowed Catholic priests to be beaten and murdered on the streets by fascist thugs? What will happen to them?
I don't know.
Then find out.
It's outside my jurisdiction.
In Rome, nothing is ever outside the jurisdiction of a cardinal. You're a prince of the church. So for Christ's sake, use your influence and do something.
Look, you do not understand. There are different departments, each with its own rules and administration.
Why did you bother to come here in the first place? What is it that you want?
Persuade those responsible for what happened in the Via Rasella to give themselves up. Well, why should innocent ones suffer?
What happened in the Via Rasella was an act of war. In war, blows are struck.
Look, they must have known beforehand that the Germans would retaliate in this way.
Do you think that we're playing hide and seek?
No.
Perhaps you would like us to read them the Sermon on the Mount.
Look, Maria, the lives of the hostages, including Don Borelli, may be forfeited.
The lives of workers have always been forfeited over and over again.
Why? In God's name, cannot those who took part in the attack accept the responsibility?
Offer themselves up, like lambs to the slaughter, and invite the Germans to do exactly the same thing next time. The resistance wouldn't last a week.
Well, I've done what I can. And now it is the communists who must bear the guilt for whatever happens.
So that's why you came. You haven't changed much, have you, Giovanni?
To see you.
To purge your guilt.
My guilt.
You'll find no absolution here.
Maria.
I have work to do.
Quite an impressive dossier we have here, Father Borelli. I see now why the Church is hostile to your brand of Christianity.
No one falls asleep when I say Mass. I preach the Word of God.
And so does Pius, with the added advantage of speaking as Christ's representative.
He speaks with the personal authority of a theologian. No more, no less.
I grew up in a Catholic home.
Really?
Still feel that sense of danger whenever I meet a priest.
Jesuit?
Shows?
Yes.
I must be careful. Father Don Borelli. Ordained 22 years ago, member of the Catholic Partito Popolare founded by the Sicilian priest Don Luigi Sturzo in 1924, arrested in 1935 for opposing the war with Ethiopia, active as worker priest during 1940-41, advocate of land reform, suspected of communist activities. Neither you nor your church have anything to complain about. I've had men shot for less. I see here that your temporal requirements are well catered for. The Via Cinelli. Oh. Housekeeper? Well, surely you could have done better than that, Father Borelli.
The vow of chastity is not an article of faith, you know.
I personally find celibacy unnatural and degrading.
I I could say the same for your methods of persuasion, Obersturmbannführer Steiner.
Yes. I'm afraid our technique has changed little since the days of the Inquisition, Father Borelli. You needn't worry, we shan't bother you again.
Can I offer you some refreshment, Your Eminence?
No, thank you.
Leave us. And see that we're not disturbed. I have to be very careful. Steiner has his spies everywhere, even here in the embassy. Please sit down. There is a certain amount of risk involved.
Your action does you credit.
I do the best I can. What happens to me is not important.
Is it possible the order for this massacre will be reversed?
It comes from the Fuhrer himself and has been confirmed by Field Marshal Kesselring.
When?
Tonight.
So soon?
We have only a few hours.
We?
I have done all I can to prevent it. I naturally assumed the Holy See would raise its voice in protest.
Oh, I'm afraid that is completely out of the question.
One statement, one public gesture is all that is needed.
No, no. His Holiness will not, cannot intervene.
It could be done privately, diplomatically.
The Holy Father has raised his voice against injustice many times, Counselor. Yet the crimes are still committed and our efforts ignored.
Then the situation is hopeless. If the Pope does not intervene, those hostages are as good as dead.
Killed by German bullets. Murdered. Now, this is not our problem. It's your decision. And collectively, you must accept the blame and take the consequences.
I personally have done everything I can to prevent it. What else can I do?
Well, seek a delay. Get them to postpone the execution.
It's impossible. Steiner wouldn't allow it.
Forget Steiner. Get onto your superiors. Phone Berlin.
How can I? The order came from the Fuhrer himself.
Well, then talk to Kesselring.
I wouldn't know how to reach him. He's at the front somewhere. And besides, it was Kesselring who confirmed the order.
There must be somebody you can talk to.
I could try Ambassador Weizsäcker at Lake Garda again.
Well, you tell him that by punishing innocent people, he is playing directly into the hands of the communists.
Exactly.
It will enhance the popularity of the resistance and strengthen the feeling of hatred that the people of Rome already have for the Germans. You may also tell him that the Church is very angry and concerned at what is happening.
May I use your name? It would strengthen things a bit.
Who else would know besides Weizsäcker?
No one.
Well, in that case, yes, by all means, providing we keep it to ourselves.
I understand, Your Eminence.
What about the priest?
Well, according to Steiner, the man was a courier working with the resistance.
He's still a priest.
But entirely unrepentant. Perhaps his name could be taken off the list.
How?
If he dissociated himself from the Via Rasella incident.
Would Steiner accept that?
He'd probably welcome it for fear of any repercussions.
Would it be possible for me to see Father Borelli?
Well, I can arrange it now.
But discreetly.
Of course. Get me the Virtasse. All Steiner's interested in is completing his list of names. Who he takes is unimportant.
Avanti popolo, alla discossa, bandiera rosa.
Gras nicht wachsen, du Kater. Hat sich aber gelohnt.
Halten, ja? Das soll sofort aufhören! Ruhe!
The execution must be carried out as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Time is of the essence. Death must be instantaneous. Every shot will be fired from the closest possible range. The gun will be placed at the back of the neck and angled upwards. The bullet will enter the brain from the cerebellum, ensuring the immediate death of the victim. Again, because of the time factor, all religious rites will be ignored. It is vital for the success of the operation that the hostages remain unaware of what is happening. The reason for this should be obvious. If necessary, to allay their suspicions, you will tell them that they're to be transferred to some labor camp or other. To assist in conveying this impression, the hostages, who have already been assembled, will be transported to the caves on the Via Argentina in meat trucks. Now, whilst I realize how unpleasant and distasteful this kind of assignment is, I must warn each and every one of you that whoever refuses to participate in the executions will be arrested and charged before the tribunal of the SS. I hope this will not be necessary. I'm sure it won't.
His Eminence Cardinal Volponi, Holy Father.
Dear brother in Christ, a golden opportunity, Eminence, to compliment you on your memorandum. The fruits of your labours we specially commend to the Cardinalate for their study and observation.
His Holiness is most kind.
We find your notes on Africa most instructive, and we agree that with a new movement of ideas in that dark continent, we must strive to bring the cross of Christ to our coloured brethren. Also, with regard to South America, you do well to point out that our work must be intensified. Impartiality faced with such grave social questions would be tantamount to treachery, and unless something is done quickly, grave problems may arise. Perhaps St. Martin de Porres, patron saint of the underprivileged, will offer us guidance and inspiration. On the question of Europe, your thoughts are directly in accord with our own. You were right to emphasize that America will emerge from this war as the great colonist par excellence. Europe will be resurrected upon her terms, and England reduced to a subservient status. Our role in all this has yet to be determined, therefore we must mediate with caution, discreetly, trusting that Almighty God will help and guide us in our labours.
I'm grateful His Holiness sees fit to commend my efforts.
There are some criticisms we would have to raise at a more convenient time, but all in all it is a most comprehensive survey, Cardinal Volponi.
However, Holiness, I did not come here to discuss the memorandum. I came here to plead for the life of Father Borelli.
It is not we who threaten the life of Father Borelli.
His Holiness could intercede on his behalf.
Now, you above all know why this is not possible. It is our fervent wish that even now the dictates of the Christian conscience may prevent this act of vengeance.
I'm afraid, Holiness, that will not happen. The hostages are already being taken to the place of execution, wherever that may be.
The sacrifice of the cross is everlasting, represented in the suffering of our children. You ask only for the life of Father Borelli. And what of the others? Most of whom are good Catholics.
If that were possible, then yes, by all means.
We know of your love for this priest. That Father Borelli has, by his actions, jeopardized the cause for which he was chosen. One does not seek to deprecate the spirit of criticism within the Church.
When an ambassador of Christ joins hands with the communists...
Which I deplore, Holiness. But Father Borelli is motivated by a deep love for humanity.
It refuses to obey the authority of the Holy See.
Well, only because he is concerned with the temporal demands of this world, as well as the spiritual demands of eternity. He fights social injustice in the name of the Catholic Church, and would argue, with some justification, that a dialogue between communism and Christianity is worthy our consideration.
With some justification, Eminence?
I recognize communism as a fact, Holiness. And I can understand why many good Christians like Father Borelli would consider it a form of practical Christianity.
As supreme pastor of the flock, directly answerable to God, I say that such a union would be unthinkable.
Well, not union, Holiness. The Holy Father appears to misunderstand my position, perhaps because I explain myself badly.
The responsibility of holy office cannot be lightly thrust aside, Your Eminence.
The true communist who accepts the godless atheism of Marxist ideology and the Roman Catholic who obeys divine authority can never at any time embrace as brothers. The differences which separate us are irreconcilable. Upon that, there must be no room for any misunderstanding.
And you also must understand that we are fully aware of the misery and injustice which walks the earth. And we watch with concern the sufferings of all our children.
And if I may suggest, Holiness, it is within the framework of your concern for these sufferings that the idea of a dialogue between communism and Christianity has considerable merit. We must rejoice that the peace of Christ will soon be restored, but the war has left Italy and the world broken and demoralized. And everywhere we see evidence of damaged souls responding to atheistic ideas which take no account of God's law and which threaten revolution. Now, this Holy Father is the objective reality of the situation.
Against which the Catholic Church, whose king is truth, whose law is charity, whose frontier is eternity, stands like a citadel of hope above the waves of violence and man's ambition.
And yet, although the situation is ripe for revolution, yet, ironically enough, the leadership of the Communist Party itself have clearly shown that they have no intention of acting as a generator for world revolution. On the contrary, all the evidence shows that they're anxious to avoid such a calamity. Now, Holy Father, I believe that it would be in our interests to begin a dialogue with them, at least until such a time as a measure of discipline and stability has been restored. And it is within this context that Father Borelli's work assumes a new importance and significance.
His Eminence speaks with his usual clarity and foresight. Yet I fear his enthusiasm for political maneuvering outstrips his common sense. Leadership can be overthrown and advice ignored, especially under the impetus of war. To what extent and with what assurance can you personally guarantee us that the 40,000 resistance fighters in Italy will also respond? Or the brigades scattered to the west in Emilia, and between Modena and Garfagnana? Or Parma and La Spezia, Piacenza and Genoa? What influence will Mr. Togliatti have upon the Garibaldi divisions in Venezia, Liguria and Lombardia? And what about Rome itself? The brutal assault in the Via Rasella was mounted by communist terrorists whose purpose was to provoke an armed rising against the Germans. No, Your Eminence. We shall on no account conduct this dialogue with Christ's enemies. Knowing the affection you have for this fallen priest, we hope you will discover the strength to accept the burden of responsibility that God has placed on all our shoulders. Go in peace, my son. And pray for us.
saw Maria.
Was she pleased to see you?
Are you?
Well, a lot has happened since we worked together.
And you now regard me as a reactionary. But those venerable old men in the Vatican think otherwise.
How is His Holiness? Does he still claim to see visions in the hope that one day he'll be canonized?
So he says.
Why have you come?
You know about the Via Rasella?
We hear rumors even in this place.
33 Germans killed. And they're taking hostages.
Yeah. That's why Steiner didn't bother to interrogate me again.
You've already seen him?
Yes. Why? What's going to happen to us? Deportation?
I don't know.
You never did learn to lie with your face, Giovanni. What is it? Why have you come?
Here.
What's that?
Steiner's agreed to release you, providing you sign this piece of paper, which I took the liberty of drafting. Now, it is just a simple statement, which you can renounce the moment you walk out of here. My car's outside.
Just me?
I ask you, as a priest and as a friend, to do this.
It wouldn't be right.
As a priest, you seem to lay more emphasis on politics than on religion.
Can you separate social and religious questions, Evidence?
No. But our mission is to save souls. The world cannot be put right by politics alone.
I agree. There can be no salvation without Christ. What I fail to understand is why the church must always be on the side of the oppressor. I am forbidden to take part in politics. But who else practices politics more than the Curia? How many ambassadors and ministers are represented at the Vatican?
At the last count, I believe it was 52.
And hasn't the church always interfered in the internal affairs of other countries?
Well, it depends what you mean by interfering. I don't regard looking after the welfare of the faithful, and where necessary, defending the rights of the Holy Church as interfering.
Yes, but the ultimate objective of the Church's policy when dealing with countries outside Rome has always been the signing of the Concordat. Wouldn't you agree?
Treaties agreed to between Church and State are always welcome, yes.
Yes. And when Pope Pius signed the Concordat with Adolf Hitler, and before him Mussolini, guaranteeing the support of all Catholics, and by decree instructing members of the clergy not to interfere or even criticize things that were going on, he placed a noose round the neck of mankind and signed the death warrant of every Jew in Europe.
The Concordat had its advantages.
For whom?
Without wishing to defend the outrageous crimes of fascism, which I loathe, the alliance with Hitler held back the forces of atheistic communism. The cross of Christ was in mortal danger. And I must remind you that Hitler broke his promise to us, and then on more than one occasion was openly rebuked by the Holy Father.
The disagreement came over the business of education and harassment of the Catholic press. A disagreement between business partners as to who should have the controlling interest. Not once did he condemn the ideology of fascism, the torture of thousands, the pogrom against the Jews. And to sign your paper is to associate myself with that. Sorry, these things have to be said.
But not to me.
They're moving the prisoners. Why? Why are they moving the prisoners?
Probably some routine procedure. long time since I heard that.
You remember? You and me, Anne-Maria, that night in Turin, in the cellar, after the police broke up the demonstration. Bandiera Rossa triumpharà.
That's all in the past.
Today this prison shook with it.
You're accused of collaborating with the resistance, I believe.
Yes.
And why the communists?
Who else were worthwhile is there in the resistance?
And for how long?
Oh, over a year now. I was a courier.
Now that alone merits excommunication.
I wouldn't want that.
You have to choose. Either your religion is an impediment to your politics, or your politics is an impediment to your religion.
That implies that Christianity and communism are incompatible. And this I will not accept.
Oh, but you have to. Communism implies atheism. The Holy Father has decreed this to be so, and all Catholics must accept the teachings of the Holy See.
And if those teachers are wrong?
You show a lack of faith in others.
Better qualified to do my own thinking for me.
You've always lacked the spirit of submission.
That is what Obersturmbannführer Steiner said. His methods of persuasion are more forceful than yours.
Is there anything I can do?
Yes, you could get me out of here.
Look, the choice is yours. They tortured you?
No. They used their fists, the boot, the knee, and the groin, the usual routine methods of interrogation. Nothing very imaginative. But after all, this is my third time.
You seem to be enjoying the experience.
On the contrary, I'm always so terrified. I continually end up wetting my pants. I have always held the view that half the saints must have either been neurotic or under the influence of drink. How otherwise could they welcome pain?
That is just facetious. Your usual violation of all that the Church holds sacred.
Yesterday in that courtyard, I watched Jewish families being dragged from their homes and brought here. Men, women, little children. They all knew that for them, the future was neither speculative nor problematical. This also is a violation of all the Church holds sacred. Anyway, my future plans will prevent any further desecration of the cloth.
What plans?
I've decided to see my bishop and tell him I wish to be reduced to the state of layman.
To renounce your priesthood.
I shall always be a Catholic. I can no longer go about whitewashing the policies of the Church, saying one thing, believing another. Oh, I know what will happen. I shall be denounced from the pulpit, threatened with persecution in this life and eternal damnation in the next.
And this doesn't frighten you?
Yes, I fear God as I fear death. It is for him to decide. Hitler, Stalin, and Pius. Have you noticed the similarity? Each one omnipotent, their power absolute.
But each aspiring to different goals.
Yes, but the power structure is almost identical. Pius claims it is a mortal sin for any Catholic to read certain books, so the Church draws up its index.
Which I'm against, as well you know.
Over 7,000 writers whose works we are not allowed to read. Zola, Pascal Rousseau, Flaubert, Voltaire, Defoe, Victor Hugo. Even Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which at this particular moment of time I would have thought most instructive. Hitler and Stalin both burned their forbidden books, while the Church, having recently abandoned this practice, placed theirs on the index. They shoot, and in prison we threaten them with eternal damnation. All three exercise the right to prescribe certain ideas and proclaim it a duty to convert people to their particular creed and philosophy.
Oh, then your quarrel is not just with Pius. You're questioning the fundamental role of the Church. You deny its right to convert mankind to Roman Catholicism.
No single person, institution, religion or political party has the right to tell everybody what to think. Yeah, it's gone quiet again. Usually you can hear the sound of men being whipped. And not just communists, mind you. Liberals, socialists, monarchists. I often wonder whether or not the torturers are Catholics. Oh, that would be permissible, of course. For while Pius claims that no Catholic can be a socialist, he has no objection to them serving a party led by an atheist. There's a contradiction for you. Your political department has some hard slogging to do, Your Eminence. The Church has blotted its copybook, and the sooner it realizes it, the better. Look.
Politically, you and I are on the same side.
Except that I'm locked in here and you're not.
But you don't have to be. You could be out there. And the Church needs you. I agree with you that we must eradicate the evils of capitalism.
How?
Poverty, unemployment, bad social conditions, they all must go. Well, what are you smiling for? Isn't that what you want?
Yes, of course. I'm waiting for you to tell me how.
By aligning ourselves, by aligning the Church with the forces of progress and enlightenment. After this war, Europe will bristle with politicians preaching socialism and reform.
In order to disarm the working class, to take away their guns and their newly discovered solidarity and send them packing back to their homes and factories, dispersed and no longer a threat. And when the danger is past and the opportunity lost, the same men will still be in control. Nothing will have changed.
You are wrong. The past is dead. The lesson is learned. Capitalism will be forced to yield up some of its power and privilege.
I see. Like the Church, they too must know when to yield. Is that it?
If you like, yes.
And for the same reason. They will adapt in order to retain their power.
But there will still be change and progress. And the Church will need worker priests, men like yourself.
To help restore its tarnished image.
How can I help you if you won't help yourself? I find you impossible.
But useful, and necessary. Oh, Volponi. For 21 years, the Church has stood mute in the face of fascism. And now that the tide has turned, you think you can just wipe the slate clean by using a few worker priests to do penance for the sins that you've committed? It's too late for that. In the eyes of the people, the Curia is discredited. And when peace does come, if the Church is going to survive, then it must acknowledge its mistakes and rediscover Christ in socialism.
But the process must be through evolution, not through revolution. Man is not perfect.
But change society and you will change, man.
He is prone to evil.
No condition.
Prone to evil, which is why the people of Germany and Italy supported fascism.
Well, apart from the fact that the Church advised them to, they were driven to it. By fear, by ignorance, by hunger, by unemployment. Where else could they turn? Fascism didn't drop out of the skies. And as long as you have capitalism, you will have men like Steiner. But this time there is an alternative.
Oh, what? The Communist Party?
Oh, forget about the party. It's the philosophy I'm interested in.
Yes, as a Catholic, so you should be.
Giovanni, I have found the spirit of Christ's gospel alive in the hearts of many workers who call themselves communists. And straight-laced Christians who wear their Christianity like some fetish to ward off evil spirits. Care. Respect for each other. This is the basis for both communism and Christianity.
Perhaps. But where they differ is in communism's belief that the kingdom of heaven can be achieved on this earth. Now, the Church knows that that is not so.
Because the Church's commitment is to dogma, not to people. They ask for bread, you give them sermons and spiritual trickery. Communism is Christianity in practice, which is why I believe in both.
Before we start singing the Internazionale in Latin, it's time you learned a few home truths. You really believe that communism is Christianity in practice?
Yes.
Despite the Moscow trials, the purges and the terror, you still believe this?
I believe Russia has passed through her period of the Inquisition.
Really?
Yes.
And still intent upon destroying world capitalism? Still cherishing the ideals of the October Revolution?
Yes.
Then why is it that representatives of Russia and Britain have already met in secret and between them divided Europe into different spheres of influence? So much for Stalin, so much for Churchill. Now, that is true.
Nonsense.
It was decided after the Tehran conference last December.
Where did you get this information?
The Church has had nearly 2,000 years in which to perfect the most reliable network of intelligence agents operating anywhere in the world. I'm surprised you ask. Shall I go on? The meeting was used to discuss the subject of what is to happen to Europe after the war. And when Molotov assured Eden that there would be no change in the existing social structure of Romania, which Russia was to claim as her share of the spoils, Britain realized that they could deal with Stalin as with the Tsar. Now, the terms of the agreement is based upon a percentage plan, with Russia getting 90% of Romania and 75% of Bulgaria, and Britain getting 90% predominance in Greece and 50% influence in Yugoslavia and Hungary. And needless to say, neither the government nor the people of the countries concerned was ever consulted.
But in Greece, 2/3 of the country is already in the hands of the National Liberation Front.
Led by the Communist Party,
Yes.
who on the orders of Stalin will betray the revolution. Churchill favours Papandreou as Prime Minister and intends bringing King George II back from exile. The Greek people will resist, and when British troops intervene to restore the monarchy, Stalin will look the other way.
What about here?
At the end of this month, or the beginning of next, the leader of the Italian Communist Party, Palmiro Togliatti, will return home after 17 years' exile in Moscow to carry out the orders of Stalin. He will use the Communist Party to divert the masses away from the path of revolution and into the arms of a benevolent parliamentary democracy. And in return, the post-war government will offer him a seat in the cabinet. And the party will then emerge, anxious to assure everyone that there never was any cause for alarm. The government, by the way, will probably be led by De Gasperi of the Christian Democrats, a good Catholic who from 1929 worked as librarian and translator in the Vatican. And the same policy of coexistence will be followed elsewhere. Barauda in America, Torres in France, Pollitt in England, they have all received their instructions. Russia is a police state. And Stalin is not interested in social change. Now you tell me what you gain by refusing to sign this. There's something else.
What goes on under that red hat, Volponi? You sit there and with approval inform me of an agreement which will cause death, misery, and poverty for millions.
Not approval.
Oh, detachment then, indifference.
No.
Yes, more horse trading, more concordance. Only this time not for a few acres of land. Well, let me tell you, Your Eminence, men who have nothing to lose are dangerous.
It is the elite of this world who decide what shall be done, not the masses.
And you are its statesman, its spokesman. No wild honey in the desert for our worthy cardinal. You don't get that eating spaghetti. Tell Pius you've delivered your message.
I'm sorry.
I'm not disillusioned. Why should I be? When I get out of here, I'll shout it from the rooftops.
Father Borelli.
What more glad tidings would now?
Before, when you asked me what was to happen to the hostages, I lied to you.
Oh.
They're to be executed.
Executed? But they never even heard of the Via Rasella. How many?
330.
Oh, sweet suffering Christ.
I am sure that if those responsible for what happened in the Via Rasella had given themselves up, the Germans would have released the hostages.
Yet still the Church has not intervened. First the Jews, now. Tell me, what thin coat of moral justification does the Holy Father offer us this time to excuse his silence?
Please, Father Borelli.
Answer me!
Sorry, Eminence.
5 more minutes.
I already left him to the last.
Please, leave us.
Can't. Truck's there waiting. Now, don't let's have a scene, Father. Isn't my fault. I'm only obeying orders. Come on now.
I order you to wait outside in the corridor.
With respect, Eminence, I'm a soldier and I do what I'm told.
We shall see.
Oh, let's get it over with.
If you do not leave this cell at once, I shall personally report you to Colonel Steiner.
You'd better do what he says, comrade. Wheels within wheels. This messenger of Christ is highly thought of by the Gestapo.
All right. 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Don't tell me that under that little red hat you're concealing a file. Oh, stop acting the fool. You're too high up anyway.
Please. Pablo. Sign it. Steiner will release Lou. He will. But you must offer him something.
You want me to run away from the fight as you did in 1938?
I want you to live.
So do I.
And please, do as I ask.
And allow you to sleep nights. If I were to capitulate now, the Germans would use it to discredit the resistance. My signature would serve the executioner and slander the victims. Besides, it would mean someone else would have to take my place. You must allow me to act as your confessor. There isn't much time. Put it away. What? You heard me. Put it away. But you must make your peace with God. I'm already at peace with God. It's you fellas I can't stand. God! Please, Father Borelli, I beg you! God! God! Have you nothing to confess? Yes, the sin of omission. Here.
Behind your back.
There is much more I could have done with my life. I also regret Maria starting with the curse the night before I was arrested. We made love often. May God have mercy on your soul. And yours.
All right.
I will pray for you, Cardinal Volponi.
Bandiera rossa la trionfera, bandiera rossa la trionfera, e viva il socialismo e la libertà, e gli sputati, l'immensa schiera, la governanza, rosa bandiera, o proletari, alla riscossa, bandiera rossa, trionferà, bandiera rossa la trionfera, bandiera rossa la trionfera, bandiera rossa la trionfera, il frutto del lavoro a chi lavora andrà, non più nemici, non più frontiere, sono i confini, rose bandiere, o socialisti, alla riscossa, bandiera rossa, trionferà, bandiera rossa la trionfera, bandiera rossa la trionfera, Bandiera rossa la trionfera, nel mondo socialismo, pace e libertà.